Hi, this is exercise number 3, execute Python syntax. Before we continue with this exercise, I hope you have already seen my previous video on how to set up your Python program and how to set up Anaconda prompt plus setting up your Python environment. Alright, so now today we will learn about how to execute a Python syntax. So first of all, the first example given here is an example to execute the Python syntax directly in the command line of Python. So how do we do this? So I have my prompt open here, and what we will do is we execute Python. Okay, so this is a Python shell executed, and you can immediately type your Python code here. Print hello world. So this is one example of executing a Python code. So a equals to 1, print a, and you can always do some sort of calculation using Python. Right, to exit, type exit, then you will be exited from the Python shell. So that's about um, executing Python syntax in a Python shell. Or you can create a Python file that look like this. So I created one named test.py. So inside there's one Python script printing hello world, right? And I can actually execute it using the prompt by typing Python followed by the file name test test.py. Okay, so there you have it. You can execute your Python code by writing into your code into one Python file name, any name that you want, followed by the extension .py. And to be noted is Python indentation. So indentation refers to the spaces at the beginning of a code line. So in other programming language, the indentation is for readability only. But Python, indentation is very important because it indicates a block of code. Normally, if you use C++ or Java, the block of code is identified or encapsulated by using a curly bracket. But in Python, the block of code is defined by using indent. This is another example of executing a Python code using Jupyter Notebook. Okay, so we are using Jupyter Notebook right now. So I can actually execute by use a command line execution similar to whatever that I've already did in the prompt. Okay, and I just put an asterisk. Sorry, this is exclamation mark before the uh, command. Right, so if I execute this, then it prints out the code that I've written here, which is hello world. All right. However, please do note that your test.py must be in the same directory as the IPython notebook that you are using. Okay, right. So this next example is how to define the indentation, right? So the print statement belongs to the if statement here. So we will learn about how to create a control structure in our next consecutive notes or session. Right, so don't worry about this. So what is how to create your own control structure, we will learn after this. All right, so this is just a simple execution of different way of how you can do or execute the Python syntax. Alright, so this is assigning a variable a to a boolean value. So you can assign an integer. See, the value is assigned. Sorry, this is string. Right, so integer doesn't have any bracket here. Okay, single quote and double quote indicates a string. Okay, so now it's 1, the value is 1, and class is integer, and we can also put floating value. Right, so this is another example of two different control structure with different indentation. So both of the codes will produce a correct output if the mathematical how do I say it? The equation here is true. Okay, then it will print out the body of the if statement, right? So although the indentation is different, as yes, it's different for both if statement, the code will run as it is lah, right? However, okay, you need to be very careful here. So if it is in the same code block, if you write it in a different indentation, it will produce an error, right? So the same code block must be in the same indentation, right? So like this one, so it's the same example, right? Okay, how about Python variables? In Python, variables are created when you assign value to it. So variables in Python, there are so many variables, variable data type. All right, so we'll discuss about this in the next exercises. All right, so basically this is few examples of how we can create our own Python variables. All right, so this is class string, class integer. Okay, because I've changed this is called typecasting. So when the y here is a string, okay, when you print the type string, it will produce how do I say it will produce an integer. Okay, it change the data type to an integer when we call up this integer typecasting, right? And finally, print y is a variable, so you can print any variable and it will show up all the values inside the variable. So a variable can be any text, okay, as long as it starts with not a number. Okay, so there's some sort of rule in order to create a variable, so we'll look into this later. Right, so this is just an example of how we can execute different Python code. So this is a command, right? So you can command using the hash symbol, okay? And in Python, whenever you put a hash symbol before the line of code, Python will take the line of code as a command, right? So it will disregard whatever, even though it's a Python code here, it will disregard the um, Python code um, and indicates that that particular line of code is actually a command. Alright, so that's it for these exercises. Thank you very much. Later we will continue with our next exercise. Thank you.